India and Sri Lanka are two of them. 6.2 million square kilometers, about 450 million coastal people. And the project is there because of identified transboundary issues shared and common to two or more countries: overexploitation of fish stocks, habitat degradation, and land-based pollution. A more conventional view, which you may be more used to and gives me time to explain who are our funders. It's the Global Environment Facility, Norway and Sweden, and the other involved partners. FAO is implementing and executing agency. So the lines here are, of course, the EEZ boundaries, and it also shows there's a large area beyond national jurisdiction also included in the bay. And it's now a 6-year project, and we are in our 5th year, so it's coming all to an end. I won't tell you what the project is structured, but I'd rather focus on the 10 areas of work, and in yellow highlighted transboundary critical habitat management. And in this definition, the Pork Bay Gulf of Mannar area is such a transboundary critical habitat. All the other fields of work also have bearing on what we do or what we hope to collaborate with in, for instance, in the Gulf of Mannar Pork Bay area, on fisheries, on coastal management, on marine protected areas, and so on. Two major outputs of the project. One has been achieved. In short, the TDA, the Transboundary Diagnostic Analysis. The second one we are working on, the Strategic Action Program. The TDA is a scientific document. It lists the issues and their causes and root causes. The SAP, as we call it in short, is a political document where the 8 countries agree what to do about it. And that's quite a large program of work, supplemented by national action plans, and this is still in its final stages of drafting. So these are two outputs, deliverables. But the project has several outcomes, and I think these are perhaps even more important in our context, because they're all also relevant for the Pork Bay. Outcome is to contribute to improved governance, more effective regional cooperation, also bilateral cooperation like India or Sri Lanka, then an enhanced knowledge-based capacity being developed, and the implementation of the ecosystem approach to fisheries management. By the way, I will be using EAFM throughout my presentation. If you have followed the FAO literature, they use EAF. It's simply in this region, particularly Southeast Asia, the EAFM through the Coral Triangle project has been far more introduced. So why confuse things? It means the same, an EAF to management, ecosystem approach fisheries management. And all of these, if these 5 bullet points are being achieved, then this should lead to healthy habitats, ecosystems, and more sustainable fisheries. So far, what links us to the Pork Bay. Now I'm moving on to the second part of my talk. What is the ecosystem approach to fisheries management? An approach used to promote sustainable development. It comes all from the definition of the Brundtland Commission, 1980s, 83, I think. Sustainable development in the fisheries sector, and the importance is following, which balances ecological well-being and human well-being through good governance. We had yesterday the debate on how to define human well-being. I'm more on the side of the, let's call it the more materialistic definition on material goods, health, education, personal activities like fulfilling work, political voice, social connections, and so on. So all of these, there are definitions around, depending on which you adopt, or McGregor 2004, this is also good. Then ecosystem health, it can also be defined and is. It's healthy ecosystem which maximize ecosystem benefit flows. It's biodiversity leading to ecosystem resilience, supportive structures and habitats, and food webs, functioning food webs, based on diverse sources of primary productivity. So these things have found definitions. Just which one do you adopt and which you prefer, that's up to debate and discussion. So EAF balances ecological well-being, human well-being, using good governance as an ability to achieve that. So there is the wrong notion around far too long that an ecosystem approach or forgive me, ecosystem-based fisheries management, which I think is not a good term, but it almost means the same, is about putting the environment and the habitats in the focus. That is a wrong notion, a myth. This is the balancing. And there's a lot of FAO guidance around on this since the early 2000s, 2003 onward, putting into practice the EAF. The two gray books there on the right side are actually the outcomes of a Colombo conference in May 2009, the time of the end of the war. One or two of you were here in this conference. These are the products, and we have been building on that output of that conference ever since. So lots of guidance around, and I will just go into the basic principles, like what is an ecosystem approach, a framework for planning and decision making. It is definitely holistic, takes into account the fishing activity, effects of fishing, social and economic issues. There is a book on human dimension of the ecosystem approach, and it recognizes that legal and institutional setups are also important to make an ecosystem approach to fisheries management plan work. So, and it's about balancing issues, about trade-offs and compromises. What makes it different from existing fishery management? Sometimes the difference is only small, because it incorporates existing fishery management measures. It can add other measures to it, or these can be brought in and modified. It also recognizes local issues that influence how a plan is developed and implemented. And it tries to bring, I'm using the word things here, which may be not to be good, but it tries also to bring conflicts and competition into the open so that it can be recognized as having influence on fishery management. Trade-offs and compromises are the key terms here. This is an illustration on the steps of EFM planning and implementation, and this is the framework we are using for a training course, which by the way takes place this week near Bangkok, again for the third time. It has 3 planning steps: defining and scoping, FMU is the fisheries management unit, prioritizing issues and goals, developing a plan, there are reality checks, are the prerequisites in place or preconditions, and then how to implement the plan, and that's where essential ingredients like conflict management and co-management comes in, and is also being taught under this course. And then of course checking and improving M&E and plan adaptation. Keyword here again is the plan is holistic. It looks well beyond target species and gears. It includes human behavior, effects of fishing on non-target species, on the environment, how fishing can affect ecosystem services, habitat damage, bycatch, and so on. Social issues are included, which are also caused by too much fishing of juvenile or too much fishing of bycatch, conflicts among fishery sectors and of a fishery sector with other sectors, then labor and employment issues, governance and policy context. So the key is to have an EAF plan. Very often implementation would still have to be in sectoral ways, because governments are structured along sectoral lines, and they will not change this because we are nice and we have coming with an EAF plan. So the implementation is done sectorally, but the planning, and I want to add the monitoring and evaluation, can be done with an EAF approach, using an ecosystem approach. So these are 11 suggested areas of an EFM plan in that order, and it's clearly needed. The management actions are the measures, and it's important to see you would, under an EFM plan, always implement a bundle of measures, a coordinated bundle of different measures. Don't look at fisheries measures in isolation. And then you review the plan if it works or not. And yes, you have a communication strategy to make sure that your plan is understood and complied with. Now, a very quick into the theory, the EFM principles, and here you see that these are important elements. Good governance, the key in achieving this balance between ecological health and human well-being. Appropriate scale. Will it work on a park-based scale? Will it work on the Bay of Bengal scale or a village scale? The appropriate scale is important. There's no such thing as a correct scale. Increased participation, clearly multiple objectives, maximum employment, maximum export earnings, maximum conservation. Of course, you can't have them all three, but you mostly have multiple objectives in planning. Cooperation, coordination, adaptive management, and a precautionary approach. So these are all known to many of us here, if not to all of us here. So what's new and what's different? I think putting this into a framework, and why is it not makes a difference, and why is it not being applied widely if it's so easy and if it's so commonplace? I think there's simply not enough knowledge about it. There is not enough understanding. What are the tools available to make it work? There's confusion. What is EAF? What is EBFM? What is EAFM? What is ICM in connection to that? The LME approach, and so on. There's wealth-based fisheries management, World Bank. So there's a lot of confusion of the different approaches around. And I think that's why it's not fully implemented. So capacity development, I think, is the key. And I mentioned that we right now are holding a course. For me, it started, it's a short timeline, with the 2009 Colombo workshop on EAF. We had held 2 write shops over the last years. We had the training, pilot training in mid-2013. National courses have been held since. And now, this week, there's a course at CFTEC Thailand, where a lot of CFTEC staff is being trained to act as trainers. The entire course material can be downloaded from our website under EFM training, and we are hoping in future to have regular training also at regional institutions, be it University of Ruhuna or Annamalai University in India. I'm mentioning Annamalai. Ruhuna is self-understood. We are here in Sri Lanka. I'm mentioning Annamalai because they are home to a UNU training course on mangrove management. So an EFM training course would complement that very nicely, and we have started talking to them on that side. So I think capacity development is key for this to become more widely adapted. Now I'm moving to the third part of my talk, the upfit trawl fisheries guidelines. In short, here's more full title. And these were developed based on a workshop or expert consultation in September, October last year. At the moment, there's only a final draft, which I can share as a hard copy, but there's not yet a full finalized publication out. It's based on an expressed need for advice on trawl management and its impacts. Trawling is identified as an important sector for many countries, not for Sri Lanka, true, and it requires more effective management. And the typical issues to be addressed are summarized on this slide. There are conflicts, we know this. This is why we're here, by the way. Also, there's habitat impact. We have heard about this yesterday. There are ecosystem effects like disruption of food webs. There's overfishing of juveniles. There are endangered, threatened, and protected species ending up in bycatch. There's a problem of trash or low-value fish ending up in the aquaculture value chain. And there's IUU, non-compliance with measures. So UPFIC, headed by the secretary, my colleague Simon Funge-Smith at the regional office, has been requested to do something about it. Now let me pick out a few of these issues. Conflict, how would you address that conflict under this trawl management guideline? Reserve special artisanal only zones, nearshore closures that exclude trawling. And yes, for my approach, the entire Sri Lankan side of the IMBL is a no trawling zone under this approach. So it fits very well. Obstructions to deter illegal trawling, done in many countries. Day-night closures, it reminds a bit of the 3-4-day rule. Facilitating meeting between sectors, flow of benefits back to the community from the trawl fisheries, and awareness programs regarding existing regulations. And this is an issue very close to my heart. We need to communicate better. And I will give you an example later of a communication tool which we have developed, and so that our scientific advice reaches the policymakers. The science policy interface ain't working very well at the moment in this region. Overfishing, I'm using the term here, it's either expressed in excessive trawl efforts, which leads to depletion of stocks, or trawling too many individual spawners. And there are a number of measures listed here. You find them in the presentation later when you read them up. I won't go into the details now, how to do something about these. Bycatch of juvenile impact, juvenile fish, juveniles are caught before spawning, no time to reproduce, and the species are harvested at a suboptimal size, so they don't get the maximum value or optimum value. And there are also several measures to be considered under these trawl management guidelines to do something about it, including bycatch reduction devices, technical approaches, and space-time closures. The complex of ETPs, endangered, threatened, and protected species, something can be done about that too. Recovering techniques for turtle and shark, for instance, exclusion devices, and better recovery practices. Habitat impacts, important. Again, spatial or temporal closures, obstructions, or modified gear. Effects on ecosystem function is probably the most difficult to prove, but the excessive and uncontrolled trawling disrupts normal ecosystem function and food webs. So again, the spatial closures are a measure of choice, obstructions and gear modification. And here, yes, I also smuggled in the, by now, very famous map of the IMBL. And on the right, you see a communication tool which we have developed together with IUCN Sri Lanka. And here, I wouldn't say it's my conviction, but I have a fairly good impression that if we communicate more in local languages, like Tamil language, the rules and regulations, and not in English as scientists, as we are used to, especially the foreigners who can't help it, I think we could reach more people by using also Tamil and Sinhalese language communication tools. So I think I will skip these or only read the highlights here. This is again a summary of the first steps of improvements, initiating a process to managing trawl fisheries, saying Sri Lanka has a trawl exclusion zone, India is allowing it, reducing the impact of the trawl through habitat measures, temporal or spatial measures, or through gear modification, strengthening MCS, monitoring, control and surveillance, and managing fishing effort, a very top measure to be considered, fishing vessel overcapacity reduction. And there are also several means. Kept trawler numbers at existing levels, entry points.